Welcome to the second episode of the second season of Optimize All the Things podcast. I am your host, Ivan Volkov.
And I'm our host, Bartek. Optimize All the Things is a podcast in which we talk about technology, software engineering, careers, soft skills, and really all the things we can optimize in our work and life. And this season, we focus on tech startups.
In today's session, we talk with Michel Tricot, the co-founder and CEO of Airbyte, the open source data movement platform. We talk about his story of becoming a founder, pivoting during a global pandemic, finding product market fit, and what part open source played into all this. Michel also shared some tips on balancing startup life with having a family. Let's jump straight into the conversation. Thanks, Michel, for coming to our podcast. It's a privilege to have you here, the second episode of our second season. How are you doing today?
Doing super well. Just had a nice one-on-one walking down the pier in San Francisco. So very
Awesome.
warm day.
Nice. So, Michel, you're the founder and CEO of Airbyte, and we're definitely going to talk about Airbyte. But I want to jump a little bit further back into your past. You are a software engineer by trade. What made you go into software engineering? What was your first experience with programming?
My first experience with computers was I was probably six or five, and my family had a very good family friend, and I was spending a lot of time with them. And the thing is, their dad was working in electronics, and he had a garage full of computer pieces. And that was when I was living in Switzerland, and I spent a lot of time just being with the kids. We're very good friends, and just at the time it was mostly playing games. So you can think of Prince of Persia, you can think of Tetris, and all these things. The moment I really got into programming was at the end of middle school, and I actually got a demo CD of Visual Basic like IDE, and that was my first dabble into it. So my first thing was a calculator, like nice UI. Did not work, but that was a fun moment.
Yep. And then you worked in a couple of places in France, and at some point you moved to the US, right?
Correct. Yeah.
You moved
Yeah.
because of work, or?
Yeah. So I've like the moment I started to touch computers, I always thought my career would either become like an expert at computers or being an expert in the body computer, so more like in medicines. I went for like the technical one. Uh, I was very like I did my first trip in the US in 2007, and this one was an internship in Princeton working with Siemens, and that's when I really got into like pretty deep algorithm, like machine learning, like visualization algorithm and things like that, working on brains. And one of the things that I very, very quickly noticed while I was there is that test data sets was a big mess. Like people were sending test data set over emails. So I said, oh yeah, look at this brain. Like, look at this brain MRI. It's in this folder. Like you can take a look at it. And then it's just, oh, look at this other one. It's on this other folder. And that's when I started to look at data more holistically, which is, well, we so many companies have tons of data and it's just all over the place. At the time I did not get my visa, so I had to go back to France. And at the time it was everybody in Paris wanted to work in finance, and I was okay. Let's try and work in finance, and that was my first experience going at FactSet, which actually is a finance company, but it's actually a data company. And that's when I really, really got into what is what is the manufacturing of data. How do you get from a data that is written in a PDF to a data that is displayed to an analyst and making decision out of it, and everything that has to go in between. Um, and very quickly, I think it was 2011, I was okay. I want to go back to the US. That's ultimately where I believe in tech, and especially in startups. That's where the core of the effort is, and that I talked to all my friends from college. Some of them are working already in startups over there, and that was my foot into the startup ecosystem in San Francisco. And yeah, and since then, yeah, always been in startups. Like most of them have been pretty successful, and in the end, decided to also create my own.
Well, what was the moment when you kind of knew that you want to start a company? Uh,
Way before I moved in the US. I've always I've always had side project whatever I was doing. That's to me one of the things also I've learned is you burn yourself out by only looking at creating products on the side. Like
mhm.
it is very hard, especially if you are already in a startup. You cannot just do two startups at once. Like the amount of grinding that you need to do in your first startup, you don't have the energy to create your own. Like it's like 10 times harder. Um, and so I've always knew that. And my thought was always after LiveRamp. So LiveRamp was the startup I joined when I moved in the US. Uh, I'm going to start a company. Like I've and ultimately what happened is that one of my very good friends, the same one who got me into LiveRamp, told me, "Hey, you know what? Me and a few friends from Uber were starting a company, and it's going to be a lot about data. It's going to be about mapping. It's going to be about self-driving cars, all these good things." And I was like, "Okay, you know what? Let's give it a try." And that was actually a very good experience for me because I started very like much earlier. Like when I joined LiveRamp at the time, it was maybe 25, 30 people. Here I was number 5 or something like that, and we barely just got like funding at the time. And I think things went really well, like lots of building. But at some point, when you have that urge to do something, like it eats you up night after night. It's just, Michel, why are you not jumping? And at that point, I've actually talked to the CEO at the time, and I told him how I was feeling and what he did, and actually super thankful to him is that he put me in a track to get into more like founding mindset. So how do you do fundraising? How do you do partnerships? How do you do while still doing, of course, like my core competency, which was engineering, but I was very, very exposed. I traveled the world with him. That was amazing. And yeah, at some point I just said, okay, Michel, you have to jump. And I did it. I think it was July 3rd, just before Independence Day, 2019. So, and that's really when I started Airbyte.
Yep. And you found a co-founder, or you started on your own? Like,
Okay. When you go through startup creation and as a founder or like being part of a team, you create a very lot of very tight connections. So with other people that have the same level of desire and ambition in their life. And at the time, I was talking with two engineers from LiveRamp. One of them had left, the other one was still over there, and we started to brainstorm over ideas. And that was not my co-founder at the time. And then there was a moment where I said, John, like we had tried to start a company together, I think in 2015 or something like that, like working on side project. And I told him, John, let's brainstorm ideas. And he was at the time, I think he was trying to sell his company or winding it down, and he said, Michel, I'm gonna go for like a larger company now. I think have had enough of startups, and I said, okay, sure. I just want a partner in crime to to actually brainstorm ideas, and we went from there. And yeah, that's really how we started. But we knew each other. We've known each other since 2012 or 2013. So we already had a very good relation of trust, and we knew what everyone wanted. And actually, what actually happened is that in November, when we really settled on this is the domain, the problem space we want to focus on, we had this conversation saying like, John, do you want to continue or do you want to go for another more mature company? So, yeah, you know what? Let's do it. Like we both loved working together, and that's when we started. Like officially, like unofficially, it started on July 4th. officially it started on January 1st, and that's when we incorporated Airbyte and went through the YC batch.
Yeah. Was it Airbyte at the time, or was it Data Line?
No, it was not even that. It was called Dexterity.
Okay.
So it was a bit of a play on word between dexterity and data, but it's terrible. And I remember I was at the swimming. My daughter was taking swimming lessons, and I was sitting on the side of the pool, and I was talking with one of the dad, and the dad asked me, "Oh, what is your startup name?" I said, "Dexterity." I said, "Oh, Dexterity." Okay, we messed up the name, but we still kept it as a placeholder for a little while.
And what was the idea there? I assume it was slightly different.
Actually, the problem space was very similar in a sense that it was always about fluidifying the movement of data. So more like focused on what we call like second party data and third party data. So either from companies who are looking to sell or to resell data, or for companies who wants to exchange data with other companies. Like this is very much like the root of everything I've done before, whether it's like FactSet, whether it's LiveRamp, and that was the idea we went for. So what kind of integration do we need to build? What kind of quality do you need to build? Is there any kind of like, I forgot, like you say white room, like giving a sense of the value of the data without showing the actual data. And those were all things that we're exploring. Just how do you make it easier for companies to exchange data with each other? So not completely what Airbyte is doing today, but very, very adjacent.
Maybe like I love the story. It's like a roller coaster sometimes, right? It sounds like you almost kind of got your partner kind of like going to like a big company, and then actually not, and actually kind of like lots of emotional kind of like changes. But I'm kind of curious on this. You get like sounds like a training, right? You got into this position where you were kind of like put into this fundraising mindset. So maybe like a small kind of conversation about that. Like, what do you think the CEO get out of this, and how to maybe motivate more companies to kind of like try to put more people in this position? Did they get any kind of like benefits and value from that, or that generally what people should do? Because it sounds like super useful to kind of train a next generation of entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah. That's a very interesting question. I would say that the thing is, if you have, okay, I'm going to pat myself on the back. I don't like to do that, but well, if you have great people at your company, your goal is to keep them for as long as possible. Because even if they don't have the impact in the place you've hired them for, they will have an impact elsewhere. And I have exactly the same mindset. Like recently, one of our founding engineers decided to leave the company. And, when he told me the news, at the end, he said, "Michel, I thought you would be upset that I'm leaving." And I said, "Come on, Shrif. Like, I know why you're doing it. I've been in your shoes before. So everything we've done so far was getting you to just ramp up to that moment where you can actually go and do something by yourself." And I don't know, for me, like as a CEO, you're also, one thing that you're doing is you're also mentoring and coaching people. And there is nothing better than to see someone just go and fly and you can be of support to them. And to be clear, I've had this relationship with people all over my career, people that became mentor, and like people have, like they gain something from being able to mentor people. So, so I think there is this aspect of that, which is I'm training the next generation of people who are doing something, and I myself also have my protege in a way, of people I've managed in the past or I hired in the past, and I follow them. I want to see what they are becoming, because and whenever they need something, I'm here to support. So
Yeah.
there is pride in that as well.
Yeah, totally. No, this is beautiful. But sounds like what helped is that you really wanted, that you knew what you wanted, and that's kind of like, then it's much easier, right? Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. But people who that's easier to coach someone who knows what they want, to be clear, because the only thing you're doing is just removing roadblocks and you're just helping them to move faster. Sometimes, yes, people are a little bit hesitant, but in general, the people you want to coach are also the people who want to have an idea of where they want to be in a few months, in a few years from now.
Awesome. And I love this segue, but just continuing the story. So you had this idea. Uh, what were the steps going from there to Airbyte? You, you went to YC at some point. Was this when things changed a lot, or was it some external factors like the pandemic?
So it's a little bit of both, I would say. Um, you like when we're at YC, that's actually one thing I really like at YC is like you're surrounded with people who know what they want to be doing. And I think that creates a very like peer pressure is important. You want to, and here you're just swimming or drowning in peer pressure, and it's amazing. And you don't want to be the one just not performing. So there is this very nice like virtuous cycle. Not for everyone to be clear, but like it's a very virtuous cycle.
Sounds like competition.
And yeah, exactly. It's like competition. It is you want competition. Like everything is about competition when you build a company. And for the first months, John and I we were basically doing two things. One is we were trying to find companies that would be interested in like that were facing the problem we wanted to address. We did not have a solution at the time, but we're looking for is that a real problem or not? And the second one, we were also connecting with former people that I worked with, like founding engineers, and see, hey, we got YC, we got some early funding. Do you want to join a startup? And so that's what we did. And what was funny is that two of them started on February 1st, I believe, or around that date. And at the time, we had no idea what we were building. So with John, we said, okay, you know what? We've talked to all these founders. And at the time, there was a lot of things around like dev tool, around like crypto. And a lot of founders were complaining about, hey, I don't see any person like visiting my website. Like they're all using ad blockers, like browsers are removing like tracking pixels or like product analytics pixel and say, okay, you know what, let's just find and build a product to help you there. So that's basically the first thing we built. So still in the integration space, access to data, but you see, it's a bit, it's very adjacent to what we're thinking about. And yeah, we went for 1 month and a half, like building the product. We started to sell it actually. We had a lot of teams very interested, especially in dev tool and in crypto. And at the time, like March 13, 14, 15 or something like that, like just hey, COVID is here, go back home and it's the fire everywhere. Like nobody knew how to handle that. And for us, it was also like we did not hit the wall right away, but at the time, companies started to lay off or to freeze marketing budget or lay off a lot of teams, including marketing. And from there, we lost our audience for the product. Like we were just stuck in, yeah, that might be interesting, but right now we don't have budget, or actually the people we're talking to are not at their position anymore. So that's really when we started to say, okay, let's see how far we should, if we can, was there like small adjustment we can make to make the products more successful. And at some point we just say, okay, you know what, this idea is bullshit. We have to pivot. And we had also hired Charles, who is now our VP of engineering. But all three of them knew that the things they're working on week one might be trashed at the end of week one, and we might just do something on week two. So they were also bought in on, I'm joining a startup. I'm not joining like a well-established business. And I know that what I'm doing is going to be trashed because it doesn't work. And yeah, for us after that, it was just bringing the whole team together on Zoom together, like during COVID, and start, yeah, going back to the drawing board, going back to all the people we had talked to in the past, adding more people into the fold, and just what are we building, and very focused on data still. But yeah, so it was a mix of YC and long answer for like yes, YC and COVID, both impacted it.
Fair enough. And the people that you kind of hired as your founding members, they must have joined just because of you and your co-founder, right? Because they weren't joining about the idea. And I guess that's another reason why they were happy with pivoting, right? Happy with going through this process of finding what you actually need to build.
Yeah, and also the fact that Shrif and Jared both left to build their companies. Like the people that we brought in also are probably like the future people that are going to be starting company in a few years from now. So they also have that very entrepreneur mindset, which is, I am not just going to get ticket to close. I am going to have to figure out what ticket I need to be working on. And that's a very, very different mindset, or like what project do I need to be building? And they were always very involved in the ideation process.
Why they join you then? Just why you? Why not other kind of, yeah? What did you do?
What did I do? Like, I think the most important thing is, as software engineer, we are very fortunate to be in a market that is very favorable. So the main thing is to understand what risk people feel they are taking. Well, if your risk is, I can't be without a job, in software engineering, that is not a real risk. Like, you can go tomorrow and find a job anywhere else, and the caliber of the people we were bringing in, they would have no problem finding a place that will pay them like 5 times more than what we could do at the time. So for me, it's just about, like, everybody consciously or unconsciously evaluates risk personally for like their personal life. And I think it's just identify what risk is the most important, and is that a real risk or not? And for me, that's how I always thought about it. And that's also how I got them excited. Say, you know what? I agree. Maybe in 6 months, Dexterity does not exist anymore, but it's okay. Like, we all find jobs somewhere. Like, and also our networks coming from like successful startups is also pretty well. It's pretty wide as well, and so we will have no problem there. So just give it a try and see where that leads you.
This is great learning. Like, you were able to kind of like give this safety, the feeling of the safety and trust. So super important.
Yeah.
Awesome. And okay, you have this group of people. You figure out that it's kind of, let's say, marketing automation idea won't work for various reasons. And what happens next? Because you were obviously experimenting with different things. When did it click that this is the thing that you should stick with?
From the beginning of May to end of June, we explored a lot of ideas. And, something I wrote in one of my LinkedIn posts was, people at the time were just dying to get in touch with someone on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn was a very, very popular way of getting into conversation with like experts in specific industry or like practitioners in other industries. And we did a lot of those. We use Figma a lot, which is, can we help people project themselves into the product? And call after call, we would just tune the Figma. Sometimes we would take a Figma that was meant for marketing, and we would just change a few things and make it a Figma for like data engineers. So we're using all these resources. The thing is, when 4 people from the team are engineers, there is a moment where it hitches you. Like, Figma is cool, but you want to be building something. And at that point, we said, okay, you know what we're going to do? With everything we've learned, we're going to pick one. And instead of just exploring many, many things, we're going to do for 1 month this one hypothesis and try to prove it and disprove it by looking for customer. And so basically, Shriv, Jared, and Charles would just be on the coding. I would also, but me and my co-founder would be spending most of our time on just let's find people, let's sell them, let's get them to use it. And the first idea we started was, hey, you know what? Let's build a data movement platform. And after 1 month, we said, hey, we're seeing a lot of good signals here. Like we're talking with people from bunch of pre-established companies. I say, yeah, that sounds. If you can deliver on that, we take you right away. So I say, okay, let's do it. August, let's continue. Boom, September, and in September we started to have people just downloading the software. We were not advertising it. We were just sending to all the people we were talking to the link to our GitHub and say, hey, if you want to give it to look at it, just see what is happening. Here is the GitHub, and people would just go. Sometimes they would start the repo and things like that. And we released it in November. And the moment we got the conviction that we had hit a real nerve is that Airbyte was absolutely terrible when we released it. Just it was barely working, and yet in 1 or 2 weeks we got 100, 200, or 300 people on our Slack. Lots of people starting the project and tons of feedback. Just, hey, this thing is not working. Oh, this here is a fix. Blah 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 blah. And we've really started to see all that energy coming into our Slack channel. And after that, 2021 was just massive explosion. Although the product was not mature at all, but tons of people started to use Airbyte or just play with it. We came to almost the halt in terms of how much we were able to work on the product in the summer 2021. And because we were just spending 100% of our time on helping people use Airbyte. That's all we were doing. We were doing support. That's all we were doing.
For free.
We stopped building the product. Sorry?
And for free, right?
Yeah, and for free. It's just we were just stuck. We couldn't do anything. And that's when we started to, at the time we had already raised with Axel and with Benchmark. But that's when we started also to see that the name of Airbyte was becoming more and more ubiquitous toward data engineers. And we started to get many investors started to reach out to us. I think at the time, Snowflake had done their IPO not so long ago, or were about to. I forgot exactly when they did it. Databricks was talking about doing it. Segment was acquired by Twilio. There was all this activity happening in the data space. And yes, that's a hot market. And at that point, when you have a hot market, capital is available faster and maybe more easily.
Amazing story. And what's really inspiring here is that there are lots of the startups. It's like when you build startup, don't focus on solution that you want to build and then find the buyers, but actually change and always talk to people and switch the project. And you mentioned that in your blog post, and it sounds like it's a mix of both, but generally you had to start with something and build it and actually try to imagine what would be useful for you as a user, as an engineer. And we just had a kind of interview with another founder, Frederick, and he was completely product driven, right? So it's actually against the stereotype, which is super interesting and I think important lesson. Okay, switching gears to this open source part, which was kind of sounds like what was amazing in your case, but also what was super difficult, because once with this amazing input and amazing kind of validation of your idea, now you have to start to monetize this, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people, so many companies are struggling with this, and even doing something, things like licensing changes, struggling generally. Like there's no good model here. So maybe can you walk us through what was your idea in the very beginning on starting on open source, and like, okay,
Yeah.
we are pushing this in open source, and we have what ideas we have to monetize further, and then how this idea actually changed or not changed when you actually had a meaningful income.
Yeah. So the reason we went for open source, and that comes more from like an insight that we have as engineers who've been working on data, is that data movement, at the time we called it more like data integration. It's a very organic thing that grows. Like nobody thinks holistically about it, and the reason is because it's an enabler. Like it's an enabler. Like this is not the final product. It's you are creating that network between two stores of data, because you have the intent of doing analytics, because you have this X and X intent. The problem is that when engineers build, it's very hard to know when they're doing it. Like you cannot sell if you don't know that they're building. And for us, the theory here was that if we want to build something in that particular industry, we want to accompany people when they start thinking about building. So that, yes, maybe it starts organically by just using Airbyte on a small little instance, but at least you're here and you're providing value in 2 minutes, rather than having an engineer spend one day building a script, then 1 week maintaining the script, etc., etc. And that was the whole reason behind open source. Like, can we accompany the engineers who have to build that when they are at the build phase? And also, the other thing is that the amount of places where you have data stuck is just infinite. So unless you find a way to just scale that long tail, well, you're going to be stuck writing data connectors. And beside Airbyte, nobody likes to do that. And for us, that's when that's why we did open source. And at the time, we also told John and I about what is, like, we want to build a successful company, and open source is not enough. Like you want to monetize at some point. So the question for us, and we were very, very transparent from the beginning. Like I think we can probably find some articles in 2020 about that, which was, we are going to make open source everything that is the fundamental of data movement, which is just about moving bytes from point A to point B. Every feature that goes above that will not be open source. So here we might be thinking about governance, authentication, like lineage, etc., etc. And we were very clear from the beginning. What we want is for you, you can always use Airbyte at scale, but if you want all these additional features, those will be part of paid. They might be available in the source code, but you will not be able to access them. You will need a license key. And that was always our intention behind monetization. We started actually with cloud as the first way to monetize. And the first value we were providing at the time was, you know what, it's going to be the same thing as open source, but you don't have to maintain it. And actually for us, it was probably the best experience to be building cloud, because we had no idea how to operate Airbyte.
Yeah, this is
because
very
at the
common.
time,
Yeah, because you
yeah,
are
we
building
had
it.
no idea.
Yeah.
We are just building it, and we had no idea like what does it mean to run, like, I don't know, today we have like 20, like, I don't even know how many thousand, like tens of thousands of runs running in parallel. It's just, we had no idea how to do it. And so we struggled massively on building it. And it took us basically a year, which was basically most of 2022, to continue to mature open source and to build cloud at the same time. So we very quickly had like early adopters on cloud, but to actually get to that motion where cloud was perceived as something a lot more mature than it was at the beginning took us a year, because, well, July 2022, we onboarded a customer. the amount of the volume that they wanted was just something we had never seen before, and it broke everything to a point where we say we made a bad deal. Like, this is not a profitable deal, and say, guys, we're only 6 months into building cloud. We can't say that. Like, it's just we have low hanging fruit. We need to fix this low hanging fruit. Actually, this is the best type of customer we can have because they help us make our product better. And I don't know, like a few months ago, Charles was saying, you know what? In the past week, we onboarded 3 times what we did in July last year, and we didn't. I have to tell you so that you know, like nobody. It was not like fire everywhere. So for me, that's really what happened. Now there is one thing that we also explored in 2023. Like, we got a lot of traction on people who have been successful with open source but did not want to move to cloud. Like, this is for us, and that's why like listening to our customer was very important here, is that we thought that the only value people would see in Airbyte open source was just the fact that it's free, easy to download, and everything. But no, like the real value that they were getting when they were going on production with Airbyte is that they had full control over the environment where their data was moving. And that's value that we realized in 2023. We had no idea about that before. So we started to double down on this one. We used to call it self-managed enterprise, and it's been like alongside cloud, it's been and self-managed enterprise has been a massive like both of them have grown like really, really well over the past year and a half.
And then self-managed enterprise, is it just that they can use your code on the scale, and then you write some installers, or you come to the data center and install? Like, what's the mechanism?
Yeah. So one thing that I've always mentioned and always said to the team is scale cannot be something we monetize on, because if we monetize on scale, then open source is a toy, and open source cannot be a toy. But when we sell self-managed enterprise, in general, like when people want self-managed enterprise, means that they are going in production with it, meaning that more than one person is going to be operating Airbyte. And at that point, that's when we build the first layer of features on top of it, which is more like governance type of features, like monitoring type of feature. And that was and support. Like, support is a product for us. Like, we look at support as, I was talking with our head of support in like last summer, and I told her, you are the PM of support.
Makes sense. Yeah.
It is a product. And that's what we started building. That's what we started selling. More like this layer of governance on top of the more like raw version of Airbyte.
A big part of Airbyte is like the many different kind of connectors that exist, right? And it must be a lot of effort maintaining all of them. How has it been like doing all of this in open source? Is it more of a help or more of a burden? Like, do you get too many PRs that you kind of maybe have to reject, or maybe you have to spend a lot of time, or is it more of a help?
I think that's a good question. Like, I think we go through phases, which is when we started, what we wanted was open it up to as many people as possible. No real checks. And I would say sometimes we suffer a little bit from that, which is we have connectors that are much lower quality. But what we've been doing also is, and we have a large part of the team that is dedicated to it, is along the years, we've been building a lot of tooling, a lot of, basically we're building a manufacturing plant. So it means that you have an input, which is, I need to get data from X, and in an output, you have a high quality connectors. And for us, what we've been doing is just identify what tools do we need to build, what processes do we need to build, when do we need a human in the loop. So there is this aspect of like building a car, like in how we look at connectors. So things that we've done, for example, is I think we did it maybe 8 months ago. We said, you know what? Let us get a lot of things in order. We're going to stop accepting Python connection, because if there is code, it's much harder for us to maintain. and it's much harder for us to review. But if you're doing like a low-code connector, we will take it because for us, it's much easier to test. It's much easier to review. Now, I'm sure that at some point we'll re-enable having more like Python connections, but it's a way for us to guarantee a certain level of quality at the expense sometimes of like the user experience. But overall, I think everybody benefit from it, where connectors are higher quality, etc., etc. And a big thing that we've been doing, and we're doing it right now with the community, and I think we have a hackathon running at the moment, is convert as many of code connector into low-code connector. Because the moment you have low-code connector, like changing them, maintaining them is trivial. And you just leave code for like the 10% of very, very hard connectors.
Yeah, and just like super briefly, what do you mean by low-code connectors here? It's like the second, or I guess the newest version of how you build connectors in Airbyte. Yeah.
Yeah. So the way we've built connectors was it's a sequence of layers. So at the think of it as the image you see when people talk about the Linux kernel, which is you have the kernel, then you have one space, then you have user space, and blah 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 blah. Well, it's the same thing for Airbyte. At the core, you have a protocol, which is the most fundamental way of describing how data moves from point A to point B. On top of that, we build what we call CDK, and we have a Java CDK, we have a Python CDK, and those are it's more like primitives that people can use. It's still code, but if you want, you can build a connector just starting at the layer of the protocol, or you can use the code, or you can use an even simpler CDK, or you can use YAML file, or soon we announce it, AI is going to do it for you. Yep. But the thing is, by building all these layers, you're basically allowing yourself to very, very quickly identify family of connectors that you can address in 1 minute, rather than implementing them at the protocol level that would take you like days and days. So, and now, because it's built in layers, it means that if you have this one connector that has this one thing that you cannot do with low code, you don't have to make low code a crazy complex things. No, well, just go down to Python and that will be a Python connector. And if you don't, oh, you know what? Actually, this connector would be better to write in Scala for some reason. Well, you can always go down, build your own CDK, or you can go down and just build it in raw Scala and just emit messages from like that work with the protocol. And so that's our way of addressing 100% of the use case. Is like worst case, you can always go down to the fundamental of the protocol. Like all the network stack is built this way.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So what are you the most kind of like passionate about in the Airbyte product itself, in the open source? Like what it make it shine to win with the competition, which is also maybe in open source? It must be something else than just it's free, right? Like what do you think was better here? What are you proud of?
Yeah, I think there is a part that is also luck. It's just our timing was spot on. Like we arrived and we delivered Airbyte exactly at the right time, when people were just stuck at home, where budgets were frozen in companies, and where companies were looking at consolidating and rethinking how they were thinking about data. So spot on the timing. We spent, like, one thing that I'm very proud of, and is we've spent so much time with our community, like so much time. Like I told you, like 2021, we could not build a product anymore. But I think that is something that is very ingrained, and sometimes we perform better at that, sometimes a little bit less. But for me, it's just our ability to work with the people, just being part of the. We have a lot of champions of people who they love Airbyte and they just want to continue to use it, etc. And they spread the good word. We also have detractors. That's normal. Like if you don't have detractors, then you're doing nothing. You're not doing something right. But
detractor, what do you mean?
People who don't like Airbyte.
Yeah. Okay.
Of course, we have people who don't like Airbyte. Like, and that's also the thing. I would say that's almost like a curse of open source, is that you don't control who uses Airbyte. So in a way, there is no selection, and people are just going to self-select or not. And if they have a bad experience because at the time Airbyte was one not good for them, it's like, how do you make sure that they don't think that because of it Airbyte is terrible? It's just for their use case it was not good, and that's normal. Like, and how do you make sure that at some point you re-engage with them and you make them say, hey, you know what, your thing with, I don't know, Postgres was not working 2 years ago, but today, like, it is actually working. So that's what I would mean by detractors, like people who had a bad first experience, and that's something we cannot control, and we just have to live with it.
Anyway, it sounds like a timing. It's amazing. Like what the idea that might worked in the pandemic, right, might not work right now when everybody returns to office. Maybe there is AI hype, maybe something. So super nice learning.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But yeah, it's also the ability to understand the person that is using Airbyte, which is the build versus the buy that I was saying before. Super key to it was an hypothesis that we had, and it was a successful one. This ability to cover the long tail so that you don't have to keep rebuilding the same platform over and over and over again. Very, very strong hypothesis as well. So yeah, the sequence of good decisions here, but a lot of timing as well.
Awesome. I have two more questions before we go. I know we're very, very close to time. So first one, you mentioned kind of your family in the beginning. How was it building a startup when you had a young child? Any tips for any parents that want to be entrepreneurs as well?
Yeah, so I have two kids, one daughter and one son, 10 and 8. That will sound like super tactical, but actually, for me, it's working super well, which is, and my wife was not super happy when I told her that. Is just, let's put the time in my calendar. And the way it works for me is that if things are on my calendar, I'm very like, I try to be very mono-focused. So if it's on my calendar, that's my focus. It's going to be quality time. But if it's not on my calendar, I will always be thinking about, oh, what am I not doing for Airbyte right now? And so that will hurt the quality of the time that I'm spending with my kid. And so I do that, like whether it's dates or time with my wife, like, Monday night with my wife, we do board games, and it's on my calendar. It also makes sure that there is one day that I try to really protect is my Saturday, and like this is generally the time where I'm like, I try to unplug. Of course, I'm never completely unplugged, but I'm not going to check my emails or Slack as frequently, and I'm trying to. For me, it's not so much the quantity of time that I'm spending with my family; it's really the quality of it. So if I'm with them, I'm 100% with them. And actually, sometimes they make fun of me because something is going to trigger me, and my brain is just going to go in a different direction. And my kids and my wife will say, "Michel, you're not with us right now." And so they're also very aware when my mind goes to something else.
So what would be the advice you would say to younger self? Like, let's say in 2020 when, you were starting company.
It's always something where I have a question mark for myself, which is, have we started to build cloud too soon or not? Like, should we have waited for open source to be more mature? Because we were juggling with two things, which was continue to build open source, and at the same time trying to build a cloud product on top of an open source product that was not really mature. So that, to me, that will always be a question mark, but it would just be a matter of how fast we're able to execute rather than where we are today. Like, could we have much higher revenue by having done that? I don't know. But if I'm happy with where I am today, I'm just, okay, fine. Like, I'm sure it's an optimization. Is that a game changer? I don't know.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
And finally, where can people find more about you? Where can people follow you? Maybe social media, and where can people find more about Airbyte? And how can they try it out?
Yeah. So for Airbyte, I think airbyte.com is a great starting point. You will have links to open source, cloud, Slack, newsletter, like any way you want to interact with Airbyte. For me, I try to be relatively active on LinkedIn, and I share different things, like whether it's like founder's life, whether it's around product, like product deliveries, whether it's about just news about the data industry. So I try to post at least 3 times a week. I don't always succeed, but I'm trying to.
Awesome. We're gonna add links to the show notes to everything we mentioned, all the blog posts that we mentioned also during the episodes. But thanks, Michel. It was super interesting conversation, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Thanks everybody for listening. We really appreciate the feedback you give us. Feel free to follow us on social media, YouTube, and your favorite podcasting platform. If you like this episode or you have improvement suggestions to our podcast, let us know. Feel free to use Google form on this podcast description or reach us directly through social media.
Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.